So here's my life in a nutshell. That's a nutshell. Yeah, my family was actually homeless when I was in the womb, and I was cut off from my cultural ties, from my motherland, the land of my mother. I didn't actually meet my dad until I was 7 years old because he was in prison for the first 7 years of my life. And when he came back, he was violent, abusive, alcoholic, and yeah, he caused a lot of problems for my family. But one thing he did teach me, though, was how to be the best dad ever. You simply do the opposite of everything he did. And you know, growing up, I didn't really have a lot of close friends. I didn't feel like people could understand my life, and I was afraid that people would judge me. And I went to college. I started learning about all these world's problems, the world's evils, and they actually helped me understand my life. So when I learned about colonialism and imperialism, I saw that my own history was part of that. That me being here right now at the UW, at Seattle, that was actually not disconnected from the Korean War and how families got displaced and millions of people were killed. When I learned about racism in the prison industrial complex, I started to see my dad differently, that he too was a victim, you know, despite all the bad things that he had done. And yeah, and I started to realize that you know, the odds were really against him, that there's these systems of power that really destroyed my family from every angle. You know, why did my mom have to work 3 jobs? Why was it so hard to get by and make a living? And so when I came to college and I learned more about this, I actually got angry. I was upset. I was hurt. I started this student activist group, and we protested the U.S. troops in South Korea. We saw how the university was actually investing into the military, and they were actually building a larger military base and kicking people off their land. And our tuition dollars were actually going to help fund that. So we did a whole year long of a campaign, of a divestment campaign, and we were trying to get them to stop investing in these military companies. And after a whole year of panels and marching and rallies and even marching around Gerberding Hall in the administrative office, we got a very short letter from the Office of Budget and Planning. They simply said that they were not going to divest because the UW does not make investments based on social issues, but based on financial returns. And so a whole year was pretty much down the drain. And after all was said and done, there's a lot more said than done. And so I really took time for myself. I actually stopped joining activist groups in my last years of college. And I took time to reflect. You know, I thought about, you know, what am I really doing? Where am I really going with this? And I realized that the position of the critic is not very helpful. It's not very fruitful. It's actually more of a reflection of someone's pain and someone's cry for help. And so I thought, you know, what does it take to make meaningful change? You know, can you really go up against the UW? We're just students. You know, they're a whole institution. They literally get billions of dollars. And of course, you know, they're a business. They make investments based on financial returns. And so I was really thinking about what kind of person does it take to make change. And Leo Tolstoy says that everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. So even though I grew up in a really hard place, I really started to take responsibility for my life. I started just really simple things. I just started trying to have good thoughts, be positive, add good things to my life, take away bad things, little by little. And I found really good teachers. I found teachers who lived the life they taught. So right now I study under a Shaolin monk who lived in the Shaolin temple his whole life and came to America, and his whole life is dedicated to just practicing and spreading this art. I learned from this master yogi who's supposed to be one of the best in North America. He trained Tobey Maguire for Spider-Man. He travels the world. His name's Adil Pagavala. And my other 2 teachers are a Tibetan monk, Khenpo Jinpo Rinpoche, and Uncle Ray from the Swinomish tribe. He's a Native American elder. And these people have really taught me a different way to look at life, and really taught me ancient traditions that are still very much applicable today. So I really thought, you know, how do you, the system has problems, but what do you do? Where do you start? And I found that you always need to start small. You always start small but good, something that affects real change from the very beginning, not just hoping for this big, big change and then getting disappointed later. So I realized, you know, that everything meaningful takes time. So I remind myself, there's no rush, that life is very long. And maybe you can't change everything at once, but you can plant a good seed. You can plant the right seed and help it grow to reach its fullest potential. So I started Experience Ease. It's a life coaching and educational consulting company. And our mission is to help students and families use the school experience to develop more fundamental life skills and to succeed at every level of education. So besides working at private schools and with private students, I also teach at the University of Washington in the Pipeline Project. And we help connect UW students to local youth in Chinatown, where we have our free after-school program called Massive Experience. And we've teamed up with Massive Monkeys, who are world champion breakdancers, and they're an amazing group of artists. We've put together a very unique program that combines life academic skills, and breakdancing. And I've worked with local nonprofits to try to give opportunities to these kids that I never had growing up. So things like going to the state capitol and breakdancing, and going to the Seattle Aquarium and breakdancing. And yeah, so now I'm really involved in the community, and I really try to work and build up and try to get to know the community. What are their struggles? What are their passions? What do they care about? What are their talents? How can we build up the community one person at a time? So the title of my talk is Change Yourself to Change the System, because the system lives inside you. So what is the system? The system is a system of power. And I pretty much studied systems of power my entire time at UW. And I came across one idea by Antonio Gramsci that I think best describes how modern power works. And this is the idea of hegemony. So hegemony is an idea where instead of just using active force, like the military and police and prison systems, they actually get people to participate in the system and support it by changing how they think, by setting standards and norms and values that we all adhere to. And because we believe them inside, we live by them and we uphold them and maintain the system, the status quo. So hegemony works by changing our thinking. But at the end of the day, it's not just ideas and thinking that make people do things, but actually people with ideas go and do stuff. So I realized that all systems of power are based on people. Can you have capitalism without capitalists? Can you have racism without racists? Can you have Christianity without Christians? Can you have an education system without teachers and students? So even though there's bad systems, there's also good systems. And systems actually aren't inherently good or bad. It's just how people work. We change how we think, we live out that life, we pass it down to future generations. Think about cultural and family values that we pass down. So not every system is bad, but there are definitely systems that are bad. And I could show you really graphic images of imperialism, racism, genocide, and colonialism, but that wouldn't really do any good. It would just make you feel bad, probably. So what can we do? How can we really change? I've come to the conclusion that to really make change, you have to start with yourself, and you have to start with your thinking. So what I've learned in my life from teaching is this thing called causality. It's a very, very simple idea, but it's very, very difficult to practice in real life. So when I work with students and parents, they always want the same thing. They always want the results. They want good grades, they want to get into good college, they don't want to be stressed out. But for me, as a life coach, as an education consultant, I always focus on the process. What causes these things to happen? What causes good grades? What causes you to get into good college? How do you get stressed out, and how do you relieve that stress? So for me, I always focus on the process. So this is called causality. You can also call it just being realistic. Something happens, then something else happens. It's called causality. This is actually how science works. This is how nature works. This is how the universe works. So one easy metaphor that I tell my students all the time is that it's like a seed. If you plant a corn seed, you should get corn. If you plant a corn seed and you get a potato, you should know that you did not plant a corn seed, but in fact you planted a potato seed. But there's some people in denial. It doesn't matter what the label said. It doesn't matter what someone at the store told you. If you plant a corn seed and it comes up with a potato, you should think, I must have planted a potato seed, right? Pretty simple. But people are actually very much in denial. It's like if they get bad grades, they don't see themselves as the cause. They're like, oh, my teacher's this way, school's lame, da-da-da-da-da, right? But again, you have to think about the cause. And first and foremost, it's yourself. So what does causality have to do with the system? Well, if the system is really based on people, then people need to change in order for the system to change. But how do you change yourself? And I'm saying that you have to change your thinking to change yourself. So I'll give you an example with vegetables. Most people don't like eating vegetables, especially kids. They think it tastes bad. They don't think it's good for them. They don't care. They'd rather eat like McDonald's or fried foods or something. But when I was young, my mom did something very clever. She told me that young, strong boys, strong, good boys, they eat their vegetables. They eat all kinds of vegetables. So when I was young, I really wanted to be strong and good. And I had two brothers, and they were a lot stronger. And they always told me that I wasn't as good as them. So I ate a lot of vegetables. And when it tasted bad, I didn't like it. But my mom told me that if it's bitter, it's like medicine. It's good for you. So I'm tasting this bitter taste that other people taste, and I'm thinking, this is good for me. I'm getting better. I'm being stronger. So just by changing my thinking, it changed my actions. In my whole life, I ate a lot of vegetables. I ate more vegetables than everyone in my family. And I tell my students to do the same. So you see how a system works. You change someone's thinking, they live that out, and they pass it down to future generations. You know, it's like the difference between telling someone to act differently versus to think differently is like telling a kid, you can't get up from the table until you eat that piece of broccoli. So of course, they're not going to start a revolution against their parents. They're going to just sit and eat that broccoli and then leave. But when they go to college, guess what they're not going to buy at the grocery store? They're not going to eat it. They're not going to buy it. They don't have that mentality because they don't think that way. They think it's bad. But for me, it was different. I thought it was a good thing, and I feel good eating it. And if the taste is bad, I thought this bad taste is good for me. So then I just kept eating vegetables. So in conclusion, it's like, if you, to summarize that last point, it's like the system lives inside us, and it changes our thinking. So in order for us to change the system, we have to change our thinking. And the most effective way that I found to change our thinking is to learn for life. That's a permanent way, or a very long-term way, to change our thinking and change our behavior and change a lot of our actions. So here's the theory. How do you learn for life? Well, we're all actually made to born and learn. It's our gift. This is where our infinite potential lies. We can literally learn anything we put our mind to. Think about when you were a baby to right now. Certainly you know a lot more, and it all came through the process of learning. So I always emphasize to my students that learning is so important. This is the most valuable skill that you can get. That's why I tell my students to learn for life. So what helps and what doesn't help? So what I found is that a simple way to put it is plus plus. Add good things, do good things that help you in your life. So with learning, it's more about the mentality and the approach, more so than what you do or what you accomplish that determines how much you learn. So when you add good things, what's good? Well, if you enjoy the things you learn and you have fun, you automatically learn them faster, you want to do them more, you associate positive qualities with it. So enjoy the things that you do. If you find meaning in what you do, you have purpose, you're motivated, you're driven, you know why you're doing it, and you'll go much further than if you don't know why you're doing something. And if you make creative connections to other things that you've learned in your class, other parts of your life, you tend to hold on to these things for a very, very long time. And I tell my students that literally learning is creating connections. And it's not just on a mental level, connecting concepts together, but it's actually on a physiological level. Think about if you play basketball and you practice the same shot over and over again. My physiology teacher taught us that actually our brain will grow new neurons from our brain down our spine into our arm, and will give us more fine motor control over our arm. So we're literally changing as we learn. That's why I say learn for life. And on the flip side, there's things that definitely get in the way and hinder learning. I call this minus minus, negative things, stress, feeling bad, and I say subtract bad things from your life. So things like stress. If you're always stressed out, you can't spend energy learning. So eliminate stress. If you're super stressed out, I tell my students, just take some time, breathe easy, get into the right zone, and then do your thing. Trust me, the next hour of work will be much more productive. And ego. If you're super into yourself and you think you're the best, you won't learn. If you think you know everything, there's no point in learning because you already know it. If you think you're the best, there's no point in getting any better. So I always tell my students, drop the ego. Not only does it look bad, but it actually just gets in the way of your learning. And apathy. This is just the opposite of meaning. If you're apathetic and you do it by force, you don't want to learn it. And even if you're forced to learn it, you'll forget it right away. Like one of my students, he played flute for 8 years. He did private lessons, he had to practice every day, but he hated it. And then in 8th grade, he said, Mom, I'm not going to do flute when I go to high school. And they argued and argued, but he finally won, and he just didn't have to do flute anymore. And in 6 months, he forgot everything he learned, and he can't play anything now. And all those 8 years, down the drain. So that's why I say learn for life, don't learn for other people. So that's the theory, but what's the practice? So in the middle of practice, you must act, but what do? So-be-ba. This is the acronym that I came up with my students. It's kind of our mantra. It stands for so breathe easy and be aware. So you have to be aware of what you're trying to do. You have to be aware of what you're feeling. And you have to know how your feelings affect your learning if you want to be an effective learner. You have to know what's going on. And if you're stressed out, you're not breathing easy. So you breathe easy. And I also tell them to have reality checks. So reality will always check you anyways, but it's better to just give them to yourself. So the first one is E equals MC squared. So this is an acronym for enjoyment, meaning, and creative connections. But the deeper meaning is that energy and mass is the speed of light squared. So I tell my students that your mass, your energy and mass are the same thing. That's what Albert Einstein discovered. And the energy is really positive or negative. So I say plus plus, minus minus. But first you have to be aware. You have to know how you're feeling. The next reality check is just the tip of the iceberg. What we see is really just the tip of the iceberg at all times. There's always more to the situation. Think about a computer. When you see a computer, all you see is the interface, but there's actually tons of coding that go behind it and all this programming. And you actually understand computers more, you have to realize that somebody had to program this before you could have it. And then you have to think about, all the things that go into building a computer. Where did these materials come from? Who's benefiting? Who's profiting? So in every situation, there's more to learn. All this to say is to be humble. You don't see the big picture, and that's great. Because if you know you don't know, you want to learn. That's why beginners learn the fastest. And the last idea is just part of the practice is the thought is a seed. What are you growing? If you have good thoughts, will turn to good actions, you'll have good results. If you have bad thoughts, bad actions, bad results. So breathe easy and be aware. And before I'd like to conclude, I'd like to thank my mom and grandma who are in the audience right now. You know, my mom had a crazy life. She raised 5 kids, did the impossible. She really supports and loves me despite all the trouble that I may have caused her and still do. And she really helped me become the person I am today. My grandma, you know, she really taught me that it's not about being right or proving a point or being about yourself. It's really about just like kindness and understanding and being patient. That these are true strengths and true character. And she also reminds me that life is long. So to summarize my talk in like one sentence, it's basically the system lives inside you and the system is based on people. So in order for the system to change, people must change. In order for people to change, your thinking must change. And like my Uncle Ray, he told me, he asked his, sorry, go back. So for the first time in my life, I can actually say what the purpose of my life is. And I've never been able to do this before. I learned it from one of my teachers. He asked his elders and his ancestors, what is the purpose of life? And this is the answer he got. To learn as much as possible about how to walk on this sacred earth and pass it along to future generations. So my dream is to build a school where fundamental life skills are the core curriculum. I've taught students a whole year of math in 1 month. I believe that with 3 hours a day, with the right mentality and approach, you can teach all the academics we currently teach, and then with the rest of the 5 hours a day in a school day, what can you do? You can teach them to be creative, to find their self-expression, to how to take care of their bodies, how to learn, how to concentrate, how to build community, how to build healthy relationships. So I believe that, you know, I've been teaching for a long time, and students always surprise me. They even surprise themselves with their own potential. And actually, this is something that everyone can do. And I really believe that at every moment of our lives, that we can have better thoughts, that we can plant good seeds, we can be more aware and be more present. And it all starts right now, the only place and time of our life. So breathe easy and be aware. And I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the talks. Peace.